Okay, so welcome everybody to our writing circle on writing your research results. Lovely to have you here with me today. We're going to get started straight away. So actually, before I start, I should say my name's Kerry. So welcome along. And to begin, QT acknowledges the Turrbal and Yagara as the First Nations owners of the lands where QT now stands. We pay respect to their elders, laws, customs, and creation spirits. We recognise these lands have always been places of teaching, research, and learning, and QT acknowledges the important role Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people play within the QT community. All right, so we already have the slides up on Blackboard. Sorry, let me just grab the link for you. Slides are already up on Blackboard, and the recording, I might get it up this afternoon, but if not, it'll be tomorrow, and you will receive a link, an email with a link for that. And thank you to everyone who's put your student ID in the chat. If you haven't done that, if you can pop that in, then we can record your attendance. Okay, so today's a writing circle. So as you know, these are interactive with exemplars, practical activities. You bring your own drafts as well. We also have workshops where we focus on the theories and principles of a writing practice. And we've got quite a few sessions coming up as well that you might be interested in. So obviously this one's writing your research results. We've got engaging your reader, writing your discussion, coherence, writing your conclusion. So all of those are up on HiQ that you can register for or have a look and see what information there is about those. So today, looking at the research results, we're going to look at the purpose and the structure, some strategies around structuring and presenting in a clear and logical way. So really focusing on that results chapter, or maybe you'll have sections depending on what sort of document that you're writing at the moment. You know, remember as well that while we're focusing on thesis writing in general, the principles will be very similar if you're doing by publication or if you're writing research articles as well. So that's why I've got that there about sections, because potentially you're not working on a whole chapter at the moment. Now, even if you're not at the data collection stage, potentially some of you are here and you're not actually, you know, past your confirmation or proposal stage, that's okay. Still some really good strategies that will come into use and help you with your planning as well. All right, so a little bit of some key terms and basics, hoping that we will get to examine our exemplars by 1:45. That's the aim there. So we'll keep on moving. So just to begin thinking, because I really want everybody to be active during the sessions, you know, not all about me just talking. So write down your data collection tools, the ones you've already used or the ones that you're planning to use, just in a few dot points, and also your data analysis methods. Just jot them down on a piece of paper or have them into the document, your own document that you might have open at the moment, because we will come back to this later. And obviously with your results section or your results chapter, the way you collected the data and analyzed the data is really important and highly linked to this part of your thesis or your research. Today's activities, hopefully you've got your results draft handy, some kind of document that you can put some notes into. Good to do a save as for today so that you still have your original document. When we do these activities, because of our time, we only have a little bit of time together, it's a really good idea for you to, you know, write down and do the activities, but we have a short amount of time on each of those activities regarding your draft. So please come back and look at those things later if you do run out of time. Also, do you have the activity sheet handy. It was in the UniHub reminder email. Does anybody not have it? Because I can upload it into the chat if you haven't got it. But what I really need you to do is open up those UniHub reminder emails when you get them. They come the day before each of our sessions that we offer in the writing program, because sometimes we do ask you to bring something along. So if you don't have the activity sheet there, let me know and I'll pop it into the chat. And of course, we analyze exemplars because they help to improve your writing. So it helps you to understand what quality writing is and to see all the writing practices that we talk about, to see them in the examples. I just want to always remind you about QTE prints. This is where I get a lot of my exemplars from. So you can go in and find some exemplars that link to your own topic. You can see there in thesis format, you can choose the format that aligns with what you're doing. So that's always a good idea. Yep, I can pop the activity sheet into the chat. I also like to remind you about our HiQ pages. You can see here your candidature is circled because that's everything to do about your milestones and presenting your thesis and the guidelines for that. Training and workshops is where you find all our events. Engaging with industry is about internships and really a lot of internship opportunities come along. So please check in there and plan your career. Our careers educator, Karen Carvu, does a lot of really great things if you're starting to think about your careers, which everybody should be as well. Okay. All right, let's have a look at some key terms. So research terminology, if we look here, so research design is your overall design of the study. So it's everything that you're doing and the sequence of steps. So to collect and analyze. Your methodology will be either qualitative, quantitative, or you might be doing mix. So methodology comes from the way you believe new knowledge is gained. So qualitative researchers are looking at engaging with their participants and finding out their lived experiences. Quantitative researchers might be looking more at using scales, experiments in the lab, surveys as well. So they want to have numbers basically to have evidence and to gain new knowledge, whereas qualitative is more about words. So you'd all be aware of that. So that's what methodology is. And then your methods is underneath that, or if we've got that hierarchy, research design, methodology, and your methods will link to whatever your methodology is. So if you're using qualitative, it's more likely observations, interviews, focus groups, maybe document analysis. Quantitative would be, as I said, experiments and surveys. So your methods include any instruments or scales, your data collection tools, your sampling strategy, and of course your data analysis as well. So don't confuse methodology and methods. That's probably the main thing to take from this. I did have a methodology writing circle, by the way, last week. So if you're interested in that, that'll be up on Blackboard. That link that I gave you for this session, the resources will be, you'll be able to see those for methodology as well if you're interested. All right, so findings and results. There's some very brief dictionary definitions. So they're both about examining, aren't they? Finding and a result. So you can see they're similar. So what does that mean for us? Basically, rule of thumb is findings is what we use when we're doing qualitative research. Results would be quantitative research. Now, whichever one is the one that you're using or you're planning to use, make sure you're consistent through the whole thesis, and also check what your supervisors want you to say. So you could be doing qualitative and your supervisor wants you to say results, not findings. Okay, so something to discuss, and also see what they do in your field of study as well. So align with that. So I'm saying rule of thumb in general, findings is for qualitative, results is for quantitative. So activity 1, just have a look at your draft right now and which term are you using? Are you using them interchangeably? If you are, I'd probably say don't, but again, double check with your supervisor. I'm going to say results most of the time. I do mean both though. Of course I mean both. All right. But I don't want to sort of put results / findings every time. That's weird. Okay. So more terminology, respondent or participant. So again, respondent for survey responses. So quantitative. Participant for qualitative. So that's your interviews, case studies, focus groups, observations. So again, duck into your document and see what you've been using. I think, you know, if you wanted to mix it up and you said survey participants, wouldn't be the end of the world, but it wouldn't be the sort of correct terminology, I would say. You really should be saying survey respondents. Righto, is this you? Is this your office? Are you drowning in data? Have you got so much? This is completely normal. So we need to be very organized, don't we, on how we're going to store and manage the data. And this will depend on how you've collected the data, of course. Also have a think about this drowning that you're doing in the data. It's possible you won't be including everything in the thesis. This is normal as well. You can start off and go as if you are, and then if it is becoming too long, too unwieldy, you may need to take some things out. And remember, you can always publish. So if there's really good data that you've decided isn't going to work in the thesis, maybe you can use it to publish a research article. So then when you've got all that data, you've managing it really well, and it's now time to analyze it, be reflective, know that it's going to take a long time, that it's iterative, you're going to be going backwards and forwards, and you're going to have a lot of thoughts. So write them down because you'll forget them. So as well as storing and managing the data, how are you going to store and manage your thoughts as well and your ideas? So try to write everything down. And as always, you're going to have a stack of drafts, you're going to seek feedback, and then you're going to revise and write more drafts. So anyone got any good recommendations that you can put in the chat about how you're storing or managing your data? For me, I did a survey on paper, would you believe? Because I was able to, because I was in the research setting. So we did it on paper. So I had a stack of survey that I then had to enter the data into SPSS. So of course I had to lock up those hard copies and have them in a safe place, and then ultimately get rid of them once I had all the data. So, and then in terms of recording interviews as well, similarly, I had to store those in a safe way too, but whether, and also have them saved in numerous places, because that's, you don't want to lose that. Anybody got any ideas you can put into the chat to help to stop the drowning? Nope. Okay. Here we go. Thank you. So for organizing my thoughts progress, I've kept a PowerPoint. Ooh, nice, with figures, tables, methods, and different relevant content. That's cool. And then do you sometimes present that to your supervisors? Yep.
Yeah. So I do present to the group and whatnot, and it's also been really helpful if I'm asked to do a presentation just off the top of my head. So that's been helpful.
Perfect. Good. Really good. That's nice. Yeah. And thanks. Another one in the chat is stop drowning, hurry up and graduate. Yeah, exactly. Hurry up. I don't know how many HDRs you can say that to without them getting very stressed, which is why you've said just kidding. Yeah, look, I think, you know, in when I'm talking to people who are at the research proposal stage, one of my big tips is don't do too much. You know, you will find something. But I know we feel as researchers, but what if we don't? We've got to collect a whole stack of data so that we will find something, you know. So it is very normal to have too much. I had 18 case study participants, and I really didn't need that many. But I didn't want to say to them, oh no, sorry, I don't want you. But 9, I think 8 or 9 made it into the thesis. So, you know, but by having that many, I was able to then choose the ones, and I had a really wide range as well of participants, which is really what I wanted as well. So, but definitely far too much data. In the chat, I don't have an example, but I'm thinking of an issue. My IP will go to QT and I'll only keep whatever is in my thesis. Oh, okay. You are. That is a whole new topic. Look, if you go into HiQ, the library and the Office of Scholarly Communication have a whole stack of really great information around this. We also have an eGrad module on IP as well. So there's a stack of information that you can find. If you're still around, if you're still here when we do the Q&A, I can help you to find that if you're not able to do that. But yeah, that is a really good point, and one that brings a whole different range of issues around. So thank you for raising it, because I'm sure other people are in the same position thinking about their IP and their data. Absolutely. All right, cool. Let's keep going. Right, so throughout everything, keep your research objectives in your mind. Sometimes we start to find something in the data and go, oh, this looks good. Okay, double check yourself. Right, is it linking to what I need to know? Is it going to help me to answer my research questions? Now, this seems obvious, doesn't it? But we do get caught up. So a really good way is to have something stuck on the wall or somewhere, just reminding yourself, you know, your main things you're investigating, your research questions, your aims, your research problem, just to always keep pulling you back a little bit, because you have restricted time. And even though your data might bring up something that's really interesting, maybe that's for not the thesis. Maybe you can use it, you know, you want to keep on track is all. I'm not saying don't investigate those interesting things, of course, but try to come back on track and make sure you're going to answer the research questions time-wise. Don't put yourself under pressure. So of course you're wanting to gain new knowledge, so that's linking to your objectives. So this analysis, once you've collected the data and starting to analyze it, this is the exciting time, isn't it? You're going to find those answers to your questions. So you're looking for those patterns, the themes, the connections, and to gain a holistic view of what is your research telling you. So it's not linear. You will be going backwards and forwards. Take your time, have a good plan of how you're going to attack this. And I like the quote down the bottom there. Once you've lived with and wrestled with what's next, you're integrating it with the literature, previous research and practice. So, which is probably what we look at when we get into the discussion, but for sure, they're very tightly related, aren't they? Okay, so as I said, you're keeping in mind your objectives and your aims during this messy time of analyzing and figuring out how you're presenting all of this data. Thinking about your examiners, okay? Your readers ultimately will be your examiners. They're interested in your field of study, but we need to keep persuading them. Now, the results chapter is an interesting time, and we will talk about this even more in a minute, where you are presenting what you found. You're not discussing. They're separate things, but you can't have a results chapter that's just a whole stack of data without anything, bringing us back to and linking to the aims and heading us towards the discussion. And that's one of the things that makes this chapter sometimes quite challenging, and why we're going to talk about some good strategies. So just keep that in mind, that I've raised this issue, that you're still persuading in the results chapter, but we don't want to go too far and do too much discussing, because that happens in the discussion. So when I'm saying no secrets and no surprises, what I'm saying there is be explicit and clear and tell the reader from the very beginning, right? This is how I'm reporting. This is why I'm reporting it in this way. And we will get to the discussion, but first of all, I need to present what was found. So to help you with these chapters, or any chapters really, you know, books, I'm going to say this all the time, is books are really good. So if you have questions at the moment about what to do next, and you want some guidelines and some more tips, go and get a book. Honestly, a lot of QUT's books are ebooks. You won't even have to go on campus. This is a very brief selection. You do have the slides, so you can go and have a look later. But find one that talks to you. You might have to try 3 or 4 before you find one that you're like, okay, this is really helping me. But if you can find a book, I know it might sound strange, books reading about writing, but it really is a good strategy. Of course, the other great strategy that you must do is seeking feedback all widely and often. So pop in the chat if you can think of, or you've already been doing this, where you've been seeking feedback from people other than your supervisor. Yes, supervisors, 100%, of course, are very, very important, but try to have a few other people that you can even try and get some feedback before you send to your supervisors. And it's really important to be active in that process with your supervisors and with other people as well. So ask specific questions. Say, I'm not sure about the structure of a couple of my paragraphs. What do you think? Can you see my argument? Is it clear? Is this an interesting read for you with this, if it's results? Can you see where I'm heading towards in the discussion? So really important to be an active person in the feedback process. Does anyone get anyone else to read their work other than their supervisor? You want to pop it in the chat? Nope. Okay, well, you should. Oh, there, it's hard to find people. Okay, it is your mum. I usually run out of time. Yeah, look, your peers are the ones, they're really helpful, of course, and family members are good. With family members or friends or people that you think, you know, you just don't give them entire chapter, just give them a little 2 pages, you know, so it only takes them 10 minutes or something. That's a really good way. Yeah, good. Your mum checks your grammar. That's nice. Okay, so if you don't really have anybody that you can find other than your supervisor, come along to our peer feedback sessions. There's about 4 left for the year. You can see there on the screen. Look, they're not scary, I think, is the best thing I can say. Everyone's very supportive. Everyone, they're your peers. They know these are drafts that are in progress. They know they're not perfect, right? And the process is really good, where, you know, everyone knows what they need to do as the reader. Okay, so you do have an opportunity to get some good feedback. So I would love to see you all there. Oh, I put in the link, the link to register or have a look at the dates. Science students, sometimes, I can't guarantee. It actually doesn't matter whether the person who's reading your work is from your field all the time. Potentially, though, with the data, yes, I can see that. That could be the case. But generally, if you are with a peer who's not from your field of study, they are looking more from the readability point of view. But in those peer feedback sessions, if there is a couple of people from the same field of study, I would put you together. Yes, for sure. All right, so let's look at the purpose and the structure. All right, so every part of your thesis, or if you're writing a journal article, every section has a purpose. So regarding the findings or the results and thinking about your examiners, they're expecting a thesis that engages with the findings. So, you know, you're not just presenting them, you're beginning to give us the picture that will then lead to the discussion, okay, which is quite a balance. We're going to look at that in a minute. But the other key thing the examiners are looking for is that you don't go beyond what the evidence can support. So they're going to look at your findings and then they're going to look at your discussion and see the connection and that the implication is there. So when you're thinking of those two chapters or those two sections, your findings or your results, you're presenting and describing. No bias, no interpretation. You're saying, here's what was found from the data and the collection and the analysis. And then your discussion is where you bring in that critical analysis and interpretation and place those results into the current scholarly conversation. So where do you sit? Where does this research sit in terms of previous studies and the field of study, and what's the value and significance? So this chapter of the results or the findings is really the stepping stone between the methodology chapter, of course, and then the discussion. So all very important in their own ways and all linking, which we're going to look at more because it's such an important part. So when we're thinking about the purpose, thinking about your findings or your results, think about where you are in the story. So in the chat, we've got a great question. Where does my critical voice come in the analysis? Nice. And we're going to look at it in a minute because yes, we do want a little bit of that analysis because that's how you keep the reader engaged. Okay. But we have to find the balance. So we'll look at that in a minute. Good question. Okay. So where are you in the story? So in this particular chapter, when we're talking about the thesis, you're in the middle. So the beginning was the introduction. Here's a research problem. Here's what I'm doing in this study and here's why. Then you go even further with your lit review. Then here's how I'm going to do it or have done it with your methods. And then your findings and results are right there in the middle too. Then I would look at the end part of your story as the discussion and the conclusion. So I would argue your findings, results, and your discussion, they're the highlight of your story. Everything up until then is building towards that. And this is what the reader is keen on and looking for. So they really play that starring role to solidify and underpin the meaning and significance of your study and what you found. So there's really no story, is there, until we get these results and discussion. So ask yourself all of the time when you're looking at your document as a whole, whether it's a research article or whether it's your thesis, where is your story going? Do you have those threads all the way through where you have that nice story of, hey, there's a research problem. It's important for these reasons. Go deeper with more in the lit review and methods. This is how I'm going to do the examining. And then this is what was found. So you want that nice story all the way through. So when we're looking at the specific purpose of the research results, it's to report those key findings, okay? So remember we said you're going to have a lot of data. You probably won't be able to report all of it. So think of it as your key findings that are going to answer your research questions and continue that research story. So remember I said, you know, something might come up that you weren't expecting. So have your aims and your objectives in mind to keep you on track so you don't move away from your research questions. But if something might come up that was unexpected, that still can go in to the research questions. You know, that's all the decision making that you'll be doing. And as we said, you're continuing that research story. And the key here is these are the observed facts or the perceptions and experiences of the participants, and you're reporting them without bias, okay? We're going to look at some examples because one of the purposes of this chapter is for your reader, which thinking of the examiners, for your readers to construct their own ideas about what you've presented, okay? So we want them reading the research results and going, okay, I can see this, interesting. Oh, that's an interesting comment from the participant, or that's an interesting result from this experiment. So give them the opportunity to see what you've done and see what you've found and come up with their own ideas, but we are beginning to persuade and lead them where we want them to go. And then in the discussion, that's when you're giving all of your evidence, using evidence from the literature to persuade the reader to come to what you're arguing. Okay, so if they've come up with some different thoughts, that's okay, because you're going to bring them back on track in your discussion. So also something to remember is this results chapter hasn't proven anything yet. It's not until you put it into the context of the research questions, the research problem, the literature, and the field in general. That's where we get the value and significance and the meaning of these results. So you're presenting the results to say, okay, this is what I found, and then you're moving them to the discussion where you're pulling out the value and the significance using your evidence and evidence from the literature as well. So I know it feels like, you know, they're so closely related, and they 100% are, but they also need to be separated as well. Now, so this is really important to be thinking about with your planning. Can you combine your results and your discussion? So short answer is no, no way. And the reason why no is because you need to give the reader the opportunity to see what you found first. Remember, let them see what you found, begin to have their own thoughts, but we're also beginning to lead them through to what you have interpreted and what you think is important. And then that's going to lead them towards the discussion. Okay. So they have two different purposes. You do have to report them with no interpretation so that they can make their own judgments. But a lot of people end up putting results and discussion potentially in the same chapter, but separated. Okay. And that's all right. So you could present the data in one section, then discuss it. This might work if you're doing mixed methods, or if you have a lot of results and you don't want to have, you know, 20 pages of results without some discussion first. So a lot to sort of organize in your planning as to how you're going to present, and you could have to do some trial and error. Remember I said I had so much data and I had mixed methods, and it just wasn't working to do results and then discussion. And so what I ended up doing is it aligned with my theoretical framework and my research questions. So I had a chapter addressing one part of the theoretical framework, and I had the results and then the discussion. Next chapter was research question 2, results, discussion. Research question 3 was the next chapter, results, discussion. And then each chapter explained how it was building on what was said previously. So I didn't have to then do a big discussion all on its own, because I'd incorporated and led the reader through. So that could be something, but certainly you can't combine them initially. Okay, so I hope that makes sense. And whatever way you're presenting, you need to tell them at the beginning of the chapter what you're doing and why you're doing it. And we're going to look at some examples soon. So I hope that makes sense, but we're going to keep talking about this. All right, connections. We've already touched on this about the methodology and the results. So in your methodology chapter or section, if you're writing a research article, you're saying, okay, this is how I undertook the research. In the results chapter, I need you at the beginning of that to remind the reader what you did to collect the data, okay? Just so that that sets up the context, and that will help you to explain how you're presenting the data as well. So at the beginning, just remind them and say, hey, this research investigated blah, blah, blah. data was collected doing blah, 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 and the data was analyzed this way. And then you can tell them, so how you're presenting the data. So that link is there and they're on board from the very beginning as to exactly what you did and why. And then, of course, as we know, your results in your discussion inextricably linked, have to be. Results is this is what you found. Discussion explains what it means in the context of your research field. Okay. All right. So getting started. So maybe you've already started writing up these chapters, maybe you haven't. Either way, you know, if you're in the process of it, you can go back and have a look at your subheadings. So figuring out how to present, as I said, a bit of trial and error. So are you going to do it via your variables? Have you got a theoretical framework? Maybe it's thematic. Maybe you're going to go through each data collection tool. So start with some subheadings and some dot points. That's your roadmap to get started. Try to make it simple, okay? Easier for the reader and you. So maybe one section is one result, another section is another result. Clearly, results often intertwine, but it's hard to report everything at once. So maybe you need to say to the reader, hey, I have 5 key results. I'm going to talk about them in this order. That doesn't mean one's more important than the other. It's just the way I'm presenting. And then afterwards, I'll explain how they all intertwine. So that could be one way to do it. Structuring, of course, discuss with supervisors, be flexible. Changing is going to happen. I honestly ended up with about plan D or E. A, B, C didn't work. So it was, but it wasn't a matter of rewriting, it was restructuring, moving everything around. If you have a lot of raw data, can you use your appendices for that? That could be an option. If you don't want to just have the reader having to trawl through a lot of the raw data, but you also want them to be able to access it. Maybe initially include everything. Maybe you'll have to cut back later. And my advice getting started, just write everything. What are your thoughts? What are your ideas? What are you seeing from that data analysis? So some structure options here. Anyone using any of those? So you can see there, phase 1, results and discussion, phase 2, phase 3, that could be an option for you. Maybe organize around research questions. If you're doing thesis by publication, maybe each article has its own results each time. Do you have to bring them together at some point? So a lot of things to think about, which is why looking at another thesis is often helpful too. Yep, multiple phases and mixed methods. So yeah, so if you've got a research design like that, it can sometimes be a bit complicated, but you will find a way. Just a bit of trial and error. So have a look at your draft now. I'll just give you a couple of minutes and think about, remember you wrote down your data collection tools and your data analysis methods. Is this a way for you to present? Or maybe you've already done that and you think it's working quite well. Or do you need another way? Is it through the variables? Just have a look and see what you think so far about the way that you've structured your results or your findings chapter. I'm going to just give you a couple of minutes. We're going to move on. You will have another chance to look at your document again in a minute, or you're going to keep looking at it anyway. So let's look at a couple of examples about structuring. So we're going to look at some tables of contents, and I often say your table of contents should shed light on the study. Okay, so when we're talking about draft subheadings, that's looking at your table of contents, isn't it? So let's have a look at some examples. Now, this is from our exemplar 1, which is in that activity sheet. Now, that one is by publication, that thesis. And based on just this information, what are you thinking? Can you tell how they collected the data without even looking at the methods? I mean, we can see that it's statistical analysis, isn't it? Okay, so, and you can see here how they've got Article 2 and then Article 3. So the way they've presented it is they've got actually 3 studies and 3 results chapters. So maybe this is something that you could look at doing if you have a numerous phases. Doesn't matter if you're not doing by publication. So that's one way. So they have let's look at the next one. Okay, so this is exemplar 2. Results for self-regulated learning. Okay, so this one again has 4 results chapters. What do you think about the methodology for this one? Any clues from this? We've got some names there. So what do you think that potentially indicates to us? Any ideas? Qualitative and its case studies. Yep. So look, this is just what chapter 5. If you were looking at the entire table of contents, that'd give you more of a clue, of course. But I just want you to sort of have a look at some examples and be aware that there's so many different ways that you could do this. And I think that it's going to be some drafts, get some feedback, revise and go on. And honestly, if it does take a bit of time and becomes a little bit frustrated, it will be worth it in the end, because we want to be able to lead the reader through in a really clear way. All right, so looking at your own table of contents, have a look, think about your subheadings. Flowing logically, well, they should do. You know, maybe the flowing logically doesn't sort of count for the results section, but think about, are they vague? Does it sort of seem to continue on from the previous chapters where you are leading the reader through and shedding some light on what they can expect? And is there a common thread? So if we look back at this one, see how this is about the whole issue of self-regulated learning, and then it's thematic, done thematically, isn't it? And then we've noticed how there's different students for each one. So that would have to be explained, wouldn't it? Why hasn't the researcher given us each case study in each one? Probably because it wasn't necessary. You know, having 3 was enough to say what, oh, actually, no, there's 2, sorry, because then there's a summary. So what's really important about your results and when you're presenting is showing how your data merges. Now, if we're thinking, this would be if you have more than one data collection tool, if you've got multiple phases or mixed methods, and this will be most of you. Most people are going to be collecting data in more than one way. Now, as far as when the data merges, maybe it doesn't merge until you're answering your research questions, but maybe one phase is informing another phase. Maybe you need to combine them before the discussion. So as part of your research design, thinking about when the data might merge, and if it does, is really important. And then obviously how the data is going to link to your aims and your questions, how they link together at some point, whether you're merging or not, that might not be happening, but certainly different data will inform different research questions. So all of that stuff needs to be planned well, needs to be written into your methodology. chapter, and then also in this results chapter as well, making sure the reader knows exactly what you did, why you did it, and how and why you're reporting in this way. Let's look at an example. So this one obviously is just a figure, but does that give you any hints as to how this might have come out with the thesis structure and the way it was reported, the results and the findings and the discussion? So you can see there 3 phases. So, but what I really want you to look at there is the purpose. What was the purpose of each of these phases? That needs to be very explicit and clear, and that will then lead you to how you're going to mix the data if that's the case. So purpose for the phase 1 quant, and notice how quant is written in lowercase. So what that is telling you is that this was not the main phase of the study. Basically, the main phases were phase 2 and 3 because the qual is written in capital letters. So phase 1, you can see their purpose was to inform the case study recruitment, inform phase 2 for the interview protocol. So what kind of questions are we going to ask in the interviews, and to inform research question 1. So it makes sense that that would be reported separately and then leads into phase 2 and then phase 3. So it gives a little bit of a tip, but still there's a lot to work out, isn't it? You know, okay, we've got these 3 phases. We have to report the results, but we also have to discuss them as well. All right. So maybe sometimes doing a bit of a figure can help you to figure out what's going to be the best way. Okie doke. So let's move on to thinking about how we're going to present these results and findings in a clear way. So these are the strategies we're going to look at. Making sure you keep the reader informed, thinking about tense, using non-textual elements, so that's figures and tables. We're going to look at some examples of how to present some data, staying on track and finding that balance, because your results are not the discussion, right? So that was the question we had earlier. How do I have my critical voice still in the results? So we're going to look at that. All right, so always keep the reader informed. This is something we talk about all the time, of course. You need to tell the reader at the beginning. Now, if it's a section of a proposal, no, it wouldn't be a proposal, would it? If it's a section of a research article, you might only need a few sentences. Or if it's a section of the overall chapter, maybe just a few sentences. But at the beginning of a chapter, I'd want a paragraph to tell the reader, remind them what you investigated. Okay, the aim of this study was to investigate blah, 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 blah. This chapter reports the research results or research findings. Remind them how the data was collected and analyzed and why you did this. Again, this is just a few sentences. I know you've given all the details in the methodology chapter, but we just need to recap, get the reader back on board, knowing what you're doing. Then you need to tell them how you've structured the chapter, what to expect. Okay. So this is in your activity sheet, actually. So if you want to pop into those, that one you can. And what we're going to do is have a look at 2 examples. We've got example 1, example 2. And as we're looking at them, see if you can see where you can see what I'm recommending needs to be done in this beginning paragraph to set the reader up. So example 1. So can you see any information on the aim of the study, the aim of the chapter, the data collection, analysis, or structure? Any sentences there jump out to you? So you do have this on the activity sheet as well. Study 1 was designed to identify the factors associated with clinically diagnosed infection in patients with chronic leg ulcers. As outlined in chapter 4, this study involved a secondary analysis of existing data. Statistical package was used. Chapter presents the results and findings. The findings are then discussed. Finally, the second published article is presented. Remember, this one was by publication. So what do you think about this paragraph? Informative, giving you a bit of a clue. You haven't read anything else yet, have you? But you're getting a good idea, right? Thank you. All right, so, yep, aim of the study in the chapter straight away. Told how the data was collected and analyzed, given us a bit of structure. So, you know, when you hear me tell you about these beginning paragraphs and how important they are, it doesn't have to be complicated, okay? It can be as simple as this. What do we got? Seven sentences. And really, really do this because it's so good for the reader, and we want to be nice to the reader, okay? Be kind to the reader, lead them through. You want them happy. All right, so second one, this is activity, exemplar 2. Exemplar 2 is about an intervention to help better outcomes for kids with a disability. Anything you can see there that you think is useful as for the reader? So COI is community of inquiry, SRL is self-regulated learning. Yeah, that's me. I've put the 1 and the 2 to number the sentences to make it easier. Yeah, so I do that to make it easier for you so that you can say, oh, sentence 1 does this. Good pickup though, but yes, that would be very weird if the writer was doing this. Yeah. So this one has stated the research question. So that's interesting. Let's think about whether that, you know, is that a good thing to do or is it not? Depends, doesn't it? However, let's just go to the next slide. But I think we do need it in this one, don't we? Because they're saying this chapter focuses on the results for the first sub-question. So wouldn't we as the reader go, oh yeah, what's that first sub-question again? We don't want to go back and have a look. So yeah. So someone in the chat has said, yeah, I do like outlining the sub-questions. Yeah, it's that idea of repetition, because as we've said, the readers just read your methodology chapter probably at this point. That was the one that came first. And when we're talking about the thesis, it's a massive document. We don't know that they're going to read that methodology chapter and then quickly then go on to the results. They might put it down for a day, you know, so reminding them is good. And let's say you're reminding them, but they actually remember, they're not going to be, oh, this again, you know, they'll just be able to skim through really quickly. All right. So you need that nice balance of, sorry, I'm sort of in the way there. You really need this nice balance of repetition, not too much, but enough to keep them on board and remind them of those key things. So you can see here, there's the aim of the study, the central question, important. They've got the 3 sub-questions. Now this explains, doesn't it, that table of contents that we looked at earlier, doesn't it? Where, I'm not going to go back to it, but remember it was into the themes. So we can see there why they did that. Chapter focuses on the results. Yep, we've got the aims there again, the structure, right? So telling us, because we might be going, oh, well, when are you going to give us the other sub-questions? Oh, it's right there, chapters 6 and 7. Yep, how they analyzed it. There was semi-structured interview, the 4 phases there, reminding us of that. They did the think aloud analysis, blah, blah, blah. Yep, so it's pretty good. It's getting us on board. We know where we're going. And look at this last sentence, number 8. So in relation, and number 7, results for each of the 4 phases will be discussed in relation to 2 representative students. So remember we said the names of the cases were different each time. And my guess was, okay, well, couldn't include everybody. But now we've got the explicit answer to say these were the ones that demonstrated the highest and lowest progression. So he's pulled out the ones that had the most improvement and the least improvement. And then he's going to give us the implications of that. So yeah, look, there's all different ways to present, but I really need you to do this beginning paragraph and lay it all out so the reader knows what to expect. Everybody's is going to look different, isn't it? Because you're all doing it in a different way, but you've got some good examples. So now check your document. Have you got this nice beginning chapter? If you're looking at your thesis, if you've got a research article on the go, thinking about that beginning bit, when we're looking at a research article, it's much more compressed. And so literally the reader has just read your methodology. So the idea of repeating, not as important now, is it? Because they've just read it. So sort of see what you think. If it's a research article, how much information do you need to give them? But you'd certainly need to say, okay, here's the data from this data collection and analysis and from this one. You might not, be separating it that way and leading them that way. But certainly for your thesis, I really need you to have that beginning paragraph. So have a look at your document. All right, let's keep going. So tense. I talk about this a lot, and that's because I see issues with it a lot. Okay, so just be aware. So when you're reporting your results or your findings, you need to be in simple past. Okay, 10 participants reported. During the experiment, it was observed. Observations during the experiment showed. Okay, you need to be in past tense. Why? I know you're all fans of tense. Why are we in past tense? Because you did this in the past. Okay, so I need you to be using simple past as much as you can. Okay, so as well as words, figures, tables, images, diagrams, maps, all of those are very, very useful. So rule of thumb, if it's not a table, it's a figure. Okay. Why would we use these? Because readers can quickly get an overview of what's happening, of the evidence. It is a good way to present. Make sure, though, that you abide by your referencing style conventions on how you format and present non-textual elements. Make sure you number them and label them according to that style. And then, of course, you'll need a list of tables and a list of figures. Usually that goes after your table of contents. Keep those things in mind. So let's have a look at some examples. So this is from research investigating erosion at Currumbin Creek on the Gold Coast. I use this one as an example a lot. What do you notice here? Anything? You want to write something in the chat? So it's a photo, an image, but it's labeled as a figure, right? Remember what I said, everything that's not a table is a figure generally. So we've got it introduced, haven't we? That's nice. In July 2012, blah, blah, blah. Then we've got figure 3.17, some more words. Then we've got it. So at the moment, this is APA style, APA 7, whatever we're up to. They've made it easy. It used to be that figures and tables were formatted and labeled differently. They're now labeled the same, which is exciting. So look there, you can see the figure 3.17 is in bold, and then the label of it is italicized and capitalized. Do you see that? But no full stop. Rightio. And then they've got a citation down the bottom. Let's have a look at another one. Table. All right, table 5.11 is in bold. Directly underneath it is their label, and it's italicized and capitalized, but no full stop. So most important thing is how you present the data, be consistent. So if you've got a whole stack of tables like this one, make sure they all look the same. Again, thinking about tense for your tables and figures. When you're introducing your table or your figure, you need to use simple present tense because the reader's looking at it now. Let's go back to this one. Oh, no, that's not a good example because it's in the brackets, but we have another example in a minute. So introduce it using present tense, and then underneath, you can then use simple past or present perfect because you're going to highlight what you want the reader to see in the table or the figures. So not only have the results been collected and analyzed in the past, that's why we need to be in the past tense when we're reporting. So let's look at an example. So notice the tense. Table 5.1 presents the case study participants' demographic information and fields of study. Okay, 5 participants were female, 3 were male, all were aged between 18 and 22 years. We need to word it like this because this happened in the past. Like, we know that their age has changed. We know that they're still female or male, potentially, most likely. So we have to be in past tense because the data was collected in the past, all right? So even though you're going to use potentially these non-textual elements, they don't replace the words. You still need to explain underneath about what it is exactly that you want the reader to know. Explain, comment on the important information. Let's look at an example of that. All right, so I want you to notice the tense as well again. The last section of the survey asked, because it did it in the past, 2 Likert scale questions related to blah. Respondents chose either that. The responses are shown below in figure 4.8 because they are shown below. The reader's looking at them now. There's the figure. Now look underneath. Oh, there's me having to get out of the way again. Three-quarters of respondents indicated very true, okay, because they did it in the past. Around half of respondents thought it was very true, that they would have present perfect in there, which is good. These figures corresponded, which revealed, okay? So past tense when you're saying, when you're reporting. All right, your turn. Have a little look at what you've already got. Have you got some tables and some figures? Are they necessary? Probably, because you've decided to put them in. Do they go into the appendices maybe? Are they formatted correctly? Do you have explanations below? By the way, never finish a section with a table or a figure. Always have some information underneath to tell us why, you know, what is it that you want us to know from this? And also check your tense. Okay, so here's an example of presenting an excerpt from transcripts. What you can see here is this, there's a lot of detail here, isn't there? Each sentence, each line is numbered. Now, depending on the way you're doing your analysis, if you have got interview data, you may not need this level of detail. This one does because it was critical discourse analysis, which is looking very specifically at turn taking, at pauses, this sort of thing. So it was very important to have this level of detail. Yours may not be. Here's an example of transcription conventions if you have interview data. Again, do you need this much detail? Maybe yes, maybe no. Do you need to have it adapted from someone in the field? This one's adapted. But you may not need this level of detail, but you may. Presenting interview data again. So try to write the short excerpts into sentences. You can see there in the inverted commas is what the interviewee said. If you've got large excerpts, you've got to do this indented block quotation that you can see there at the bottom in APA 7 anyway. And a long quote is 40 words or more. Same for your lit review. If you're taking, if you're quoting anybody from the literature, put it into the sentence, or if it's more than 40 words or more, you need to put it in a block like this. Notice that that there's no inverted commas. Yes, so APA 7, if you're quoting from the literature, yes, you need the page number, but this is from interview data. Okay, so staying on track. When you're analyzing and reporting, maybe you need to go back to the literature. Make sure that you make sure that yes, stay patient, because it's going to take time. You're going to get frustrated. Maybe you won't. I hope that you won't. But this is, there's a lot of work in this reporting and then your discussion, as you know. So take your time, be patient, ask for feedback, trial to see if something's going to be better for the reader and see how you go. Never delete, ever, ever, ever. Try a new version. Seek feedback from people that aren't as close to your research. If you're stuck, think of your other stakeholders. What can you add in here? How can a different perspective help? Go back to your big picture thinking. Go back to chapter 1. Go back to your lit review. Anything you can do to get back in, your head back into where it's at. And there's a lot of thinking time as well. What do the results mean? A lot of stuff will just jump out at you. A lot of it will take some time. This is normal, all right? If you can, have critical discussions with your supervisors, with your peers, with someone who you're close to, who you think would be interested, or to, you know, just sit down. This is where I'm going. This is what I'm thinking, but I'm a bit stuck, right? Get some people to help you. Referring to previous chapters is okay. Just don't do it too often would be my advice there. Find your clear and logical thread. This is back to what we were saying at the beginning. What are your aims? What are your research questions? What's your research problem? Keep moving backwards and forwards. You might have to go back to your introduction and lit review and add some information and some topics and themes, because something might have come up that you weren't expecting that you want to add in, and that's okay. So during this process of analyzing and reporting, your arguments, your evidence, and your interpretations are emerging and then leading us then to that discussion chapter. Finding the balance. Okay, this is what we were talking about before, wasn't it? Where I'm saying, okay, you can't just say, do a big data dump and go, right, here's a whole stack of tables, you know, or here's a whole lot of interview data. We need to put it in a really clear and logical way. We need to link it to our problem, our research questions, and also the way we collected and analyze the data. But we need, the balance is between reporting without being subjective, so the reader has a chance to look at what you found and have their own thoughts, but we also need to start planting the seeds for that critical analysis and where your research fits into the scholarly conversation. So little bits, give them a little bit. We'll look at some examples in a minute. Give them a little bit to say, this might be suggesting something. Oh, this could be leading towards something. Okay, we'll look at some examples. Now, that's hard, that balance, right? So how do you find that balance? Trial and error, seeking feedback, going back and proofreading. And so if you find that you are discussing too much, so you've reported something that you found from whatever data collection tool, and you're thinking, this might mean this. Oh, this links to someone in the literature. Oh, this is going to answer my research question. Keep going, write all of that, but then come back and catch yourself when you're discussing too much. Okay, what's too much? More than just planting the seed is probably too much, because you're not going to have anything for your discussion again. So you're going to need feedback on that. You're going to need feedback on, okay, have I gone too far here? And sort of figure it out to yourself. And then what you will then do is you just pull that discussion and then put it in the next chapter. Leave a little bit though. So what does that mean? What does planting the seeds mean? Right, remember this example that we looked at just before, right? It was figure 4.8. And then we were mainly looking at the tense before, weren't we? 3/4 of respondents indicated very true or fairly true. Half of respondents thought it was very true or fairly true that they would have one-to-one time with their teachers. These are undergrad students, by the way. Now, look at the highlighted sentence. These figures corresponded with the results presented previously, which showed that many participants expected to receive support from course teachers if they needed help improving their academic reading or writing, right? Okay, so what does that sentence do? It says, hey, remember the thing I reported in the section above? This links to that. And then it's also starting to plant the seeds that this sample of students expected a whole stack of help from their teachers. Okay, so it's planting that seed. Then what's going to happen in the discussion? We're going to merge those things. The fact that, oh, they wanted help with their what to read. They wanted help with their academic writing. They thought the teachers would say, hey, explicitly, you're going to read this. And they thought they'd get time for one-to-one consultations with their teachers. So 4 different themes here that are more merging. And then in the discussion, what would we expect? We would expect to find out more. Okay, fine, they expected this to happen. Did it happen? And whether it did or didn't happen, how did the students, what did they think about it? And what is the implication? So you can just plant the seed with a sentence that's saying, okay, this corresponds to something else that I've already reported. This extends something else I've already reported, or this is beginning to show this picture that's going to lead towards my interpretation. We're going to look at more. So we're going to look at that in the exemplar as well. Okay, so I hope that makes sense about this idea of planting the seeds, all right? Because it's how you keep the reader engaged. So you're reporting the data so that they can make up their own minds to some extent, but you're beginning to lead them through, okay, by putting some thoughts in, but not giving them the whole thing, right? Keep them on the edge of their seats. All right, so excellent. Somebody's already said which one they want to do. So with our exemplars, what I've been doing is I've always been having a qualt and a quant, because I know everybody's coming from different research fields. Can you please put in the chat now which one you want to do, exemplar 2 or exemplar 1? So you've got them there. So remember, exemplar 1 is the quant, exemplar 2 is the qual. Good, everybody's been putting it in. So what we're going to do is, while I look at what you're doing and I start to get your breakout rooms ready, start reading through. Exemplar 1 starts on page 3, exemplar 2 is on page 5. Just think about those activity sheet questions. Notice the language, notice the transition signals, notice the structure. How do you feel as the reader? Okay, are you getting through nicely and saying, okay, I can see. Now, I know you haven't read the rest. That's okay. Everything should really be standing alone anyway. As the reader, you should be able to get in the gist because everything should be explicit and clear. There's no pressure. There's no right or wrong. All right. It's how you feel as the reader and what you think. So I'm going to give you 10 minutes now. We're right on time. So more or less, I'm going to give you 10 minutes and we'll come back in a second. Well, in 10 minutes. So hopefully you had a good discussion and we're able to answer some of those questions in the activity sheet. Main takeaways for today is it's a process. It's going to take a little while. Write down everything that you think of. Remember, the purpose is to present the results section or the results so that reader can see what you found and begin to make their own interpretations, and then you're going to plant the seeds to lead them in the direction you want. So you're looking without bias or interpretation, but you can lead them through. Make sure you keep all the connections clear in your mind with your problem, your research questions, of course. So if you could, you can use the QR code right there. I'm also going to pop a link to the survey in the chat. It's anonymous, only take you a couple of minutes, and it's really helpful for me to make some improvements based on your feedback. I love to hear what you thought. Remember, 5 is strongly agree, 1 is strongly disagree. So you can use that QR code, or you can use the link. All right, well, we're just about done now. Don't forget that the resources are already up, or the slides are already up on Blackboard if you need those. I'll send you an email with all the links. Coming up, we've got career competitive job applications next Wednesday, writing retreat on Wednesday. Oh, they both say Wednesday. Sorry, my apologies. Must be Thursday, the retreat. Yes, no, Wednesday, the retreat. Oh, they're both Wednesday, but I've made a mistake with the date. Sorry. HDR Careers Q&A on November the 2nd. As I said, we've got more writing circles and workshops coming up soon. So please have a look at HiQ. Thanks, Chamali. And don't forget, everything's on Blackboard. HDR matters. All right. Anyone got a question before we all head off? Any questions? Any thoughts? I think we had before, it was Sarah who was in one of those breakout rooms. She said that you had a really great discussion. I think that was with you, Dalakshi. No questions. All right, great. Well, good luck with everything, with your writing, with your research, of course. Hopefully I'll see you again. Oh, somebody's got a question.
Oh, no, sorry, I unmuted myself to say thank you.
Okay, great. No worries. Thank you for coming. All right. Okay, well, we might finish up. Thank you, everyone, for coming, and have a great afternoon, and I will see you soon.